You might have noticed that I'm using the same intro as last video, but that's fine. Moving on, I would argue that World War II was one of the many golden ages in aviation, but you're probably wondering, why? Well, today I'm going to be answering that, starting with some of World War II's earliest aircraft, from mid-World War II aircraft, all the way to, I would say, pretty late World War II aircraft, such as the F-4U Corsair. While I might sound like an aviation-obsessed toddler, which I promise you I am, please give me this one chance, and you might find yourself here again. Who knows? We'll see. The P-40 Warhawk, an all-metal fighter-bomber aircraft, is very interesting to me. If you'll notice what I said earlier, I said it was all-metal, which is interesting for aircraft that early. A little history here, but something else you'll also notice is that the P-40, as displayed by my model, sports Army Air Force marking. The reason being is because they hadn't made an Air Force yet. The Air Force was not founded until 1947, and before then, it was either the Army Air Force or the Navy. That's why. You might have noticed that earlier I said it was interesting that the P-40 was made out of metal. Well, if it wasn't made out of metal, what were the aircraft made out of? Earlier aircraft were made out of a combination of wood, metal, wood, or wood and paper. The reason being is that the engines back then were not very powerful. They needed something lightweight and thin if they wanted to be able to fly. The P-40 was a big step, along with something also known as the P-26 Peashooter. They were some of the first metal aircraft. The P-40 uses an engine known as the Allison V1710. The P-40 Warhawk, depending on the model, had a max speed of 365 miles an hour, all the way up to 422 miles an hour. That is a pretty big difference if you ask me. There are many versions of the P-40, and all have different armaments. But for this, I'm going to be telling you the armament, the P-40E Warhawk. The P-40E Warhawk can carry up to 700 pounds of external bombs, along with 6 M2 50 caliber Browning machine guns. Pretty impressive for a plane that early. Though not as impressive as later World War II aircraft, it was still a big jump from aircraft such as the P-26 Peashooter or other planes like that. I would say that the P-40 makes its way into the golden era of aviation. Now for our next aircraft, the Boeing Big Wheel. I'm just kidding. That would be funny though. The American B-25 Mitchell. Another fun fact, this is actually my brother's favorite plane. Before we get to this next segment, I'll have you know, I am not only a young person, but a young YouTuber. And the only way I'm gonna get on a plane making $12 a week is on the wing. And that wouldn't go too well. But maybe, if you like and subscribe, hit the bell notification, and watch every video, I can one day get a seat on a real plane. Bye. Back on track. There's one big thing that makes the B-25 Mitchell famous though. 1943, the date is August 16th. The B-25 Mitchell participates in strategic bombing targets all over Tokyo and surrounding cities. Organized by Jimmy Doolittle, this would be known as the Doolittle Raid, and was the first strike back on Japan. Powered by two Wright R26000 radial cyclone engines, this was a pretty fast aircraft. The B-25 Mitchell can go as fast as 272 miles an hour, which is pretty fast considering that the popular B-17 can go that fast with 4 engines. Though a considerably smaller aircraft, it is still very fast. While the B-25 lacks in size, it makes up for it in a very impressive armament. Armed with 12 to 18 12.7 millimeter machine guns and a 75 millimeter cannon, and the ability to hold 2,000 pounds worth of bombs and 1 external Mark 13, it is a mouthful to say all of that. Not to mention, the B-25 has an ability to take off from aircraft carriers, something never really seen before at that time. The ability to take off from an aircraft carrier, along with the versatility of all the weapons it can hold, I would say put it in the golden age of aviation. The P-51 Mustang. Me personally, it's one of my favorite planes. If you've watched, the two of you that have probably watched my previous video will know we've already talked about it. But this time, we will include different information and different pictures. If you want to learn about what we talked about the last video, go watch it. Something I find cool about the P-51 Mustang, as you'll see in this video of my model, is that it has an almost modern air intake. I find that very interesting. They look pretty similar if you ask me. For those of you that do not know what an air intake is, here's how it works. When you're in the air, you want to maximize fuel efficiency. Well, here's how we do this. In the combustion process, we take air and we put it with the fuel. This is controlled by the mixture. And the way it works is we put 14.7 part air to 1 part fuel. This is known as the stoichiometric ratio. Now that we're back on track, let's talk P-51. Powered by a V1650 Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, it was quite the powerhouse. With a max speed of 440 miles an hour, it's easy to see how the P-51 scared its enemy Bf-109s. With the ability to hold 6 M2 50 caliber Browning machine guns, as well as 2,000 pounds of external bombs or rockets, it had quite the impressive armament. Another thing that I found fascinating about World War II aircraft that is usually underestimated is the cool science of a drop tank. I find it very interesting. Drop tanks, in my opinion, are really handy. They are still being used to this day on common aircraft such as the F-18 and others. The cool thing about the drop tank is to reduce drag. Before battle, you could drop it. It would make your plane more agile. To put into perspective how much mileage the drop tanks in the P-51 would give it, compared to the British Spitfire, the drop tanks would only give it a total of 330 miles of extra time. But the drop tanks on the P-51 would give it an entire 880-mile combat radius. That's a lot. Overall, the impressive armament, speed, and range of this fighter, I would say puts it in the golden era of aviation. The B-17 Flying Fortress. Before we get to this next part, I'd like to tell you, if you have any thoughts, opinions, or criticisms, please let me know in the comments. I am all ears, new YouTuber looking to progress. Thank you. So you've probably noticed, if you watched my last video, I have done the B-17 as well. But just as I did with the P-51, new photos and new stories. So, watch this one too. The B-17 Super Fortress, like the P-51, is also one of my favorites. The B-17 Super Fortress, also known as one of the most reliable planes in history, was made in 1939. Even though I talked about this last time, I really feel it is important to emphasize on the B-17's reliability. There are several instances of it coming home missing a tail, and 4 engines, even a wing, and it coming home safe. With an impressive armament of 13 M2 50 caliber Browning machine guns, all the way up to 15 machine guns, it had quite the impressive armament. Powered by 4 Pratt & Whitney R1690 Hornet radial engines, it was a fast aircraft. It had a maximum speed of 274 knots. Harnessing the use as a deadly accurate bombing tool known as the NORAD bomb sight, it was a high-value target for enemy Bf-109s. Since there's a high competition for things such as the Flying Cross or the Tolerable Luftwaffe, it was a very, very wanted aircraft. Overall, the impressive armament, versatility, and high technology of this aircraft, I would say puts it in the golden age of aviation. The Vought F4U Corsair. In my opinion, a very bulky fighter bomber, second only to the P-47 in bulkiness. If you pay really any attention to it, you'll notice one of the more iconic features of it, as displayed by my model, its bent wings. Nicknamed Widowmaker, I think it's worth a deep dive into how it got its nickname. Being a significantly overpowered aircraft, it took skilled pilots to fly it, let alone land it. There's even stories of United States Navy members applying full power on approach and crashing their aircraft into the water. While we're on the topic of Navy and F4U Corsair, I think it's time to talk about some of America's finest, Tom Hunter and Jesse Brown. Jesse Brown, the first American Navy pilot, was experiencing an engine failure over North Korea during the Korean War. His wingman, Tom Hunter, landed right beside him in hopes of saving him from the freezing cold weather. Attempts failed due to his leg being stuck in the plane. He was an amazing pilot and amazing man, both of them. If you're interested in learning more about this story, I highly recommend the book Devotion. It is an amazing book. I have read it. I highly recommend it. The F4U Corsair used a powerful Pratt & Whitney R28000 engine that could launch it over 400 miles an hour. With a surprisingly efficient armament of up to 4,000 pounds of external bombs and rockets, it had an insane armament for a fighter. Overall, I would say the F-4U Corsair, being the first American fighter to fly over 400 miles an hour, along with its surprisingly efficient armament, puts it in the golden age of aviation. Last, but certainly not least, the B-29 Superfortress. The B-29 Superfortress, a heavy bomber aircraft like the F-4U Corsair, served in both World War II and the Korean War. Powered by four Wright R-3350 duplex Cyclone engines, it's what chucked it across the Atlantic. These engines would shoot it over 300 knots. There was one problem with it though. Nuclear bombs weigh a lot, so the engines would often have to run at a higher throttle capacity just so it could fly at its cruising speed, which would make them overheat from time to time. The nuclear bombs bring us to another point, its armament. The B-29 Superfortress had an armament of 8 50 caliber M2 Browning machine guns, but it also carried something else, bombs. And the type of bombs it carried is what's really bad. August 9th, 1945, 2 B-29s go on missions to drop atomic bombs in Nagasaki and Hiroshima. The death toll was over 2,000. This is what this aircraft was truly made for. Overall, the versatility, along with the mission that the B-29 was assigned for, I would say put it in the golden era of aviation. This sums up this video. If you'd like to watch videos about other World War II aircraft, such as the Luftwaffe Das and the Zeros, you can watch our next video, which will be about the Axis powers. Thank you. Bye.